cycle, soils is the largest reservoir of carbon in the forest.
Sure.
The second would be the tree or the forest biomass. One of the big uncertainties that we have is where that carbon in the soil comes from. We know it comes from the litter, the leaves that fall, and the other plant material, but what role does dead wood play in that? Does dead wood contribute to the soil carbon pool? With the FACE experiment, the free air carbon dioxide enrichment experiment, in order to grow trees under elevated CO2 conditions, that CO2 is manufactured. That CO2 has a different carbon signature than CO2 in the air, natural CO2. So trees grown under this elevated CO2 condition have this distinct, what we call isotopic signature. And so what that means is that we can tell if this piece of organic matter came from wood that was grown under elevated CO2 conditions, or whether it came from the ambient background. So this experiment is designed to determine how much carbon, well, determine first if carbon from decomposing logs enters the soil. That's the first question. Second, if so, how much and where does it go, and how persistent is it into the soil? This experiment now has been running for, let's just say 10 years. We're just a couple months shy of 10 years that this was put out. And so what you're seeing here is the result of wood decomposition after 10 years, and most of those hardwood logs are now gone. In other words, they're part of what we call the forest floor, and
Sure.
there's no evidence of them. In fact, they used to be here and here, and then this is an old, smaller pine log. It's very, very highly decomposed. The FACE experiment was really significant because it grew plants. There was not only forest plants, but there were also agricultural sites and prairie sites that were done where vegetation was actually grown under elevated CO2 conditions. And it ran for a sufficiently long period of time to provide deep understanding of what the forest or vegetation community responses should be expected or likely to occur in the future. And that information is now, that basic fundamental science has then now been incorporated into models and tools that are being used to assess how vegetative communities are going to respond on into the future. So it's been immensely important, and this experiment is basically the last piece of it. In other words, that was growing the material. This is now decomposing the material.
Cool.
And so it's literally the end of the story. I will say, this wood is incredibly valuable because it doesn't exist anymore. You can't buy it. You can't do this material, this kind of a study without it. And so this was a real unique opportunity for this collaboration with the Duke Forest and the Rhinelander Forest to be able to deploy this material.